All right, and we are now up on Facebook also. So thank you so much to everyone who is joining us for today's Doctor is In program. My name is David Griffith. I'm the Director of Programs and Outreach for the LGBT Elder Initiative at the William Wade Community Center. For those of you who are new to Doctor is In, this is a partnership between the Elder Initiative and Jefferson Health. So we do these programs monthly, each focused on a different health topic, and have Jefferson doctors come in to present on whatever the day's given topic is. And so today we are talking about exercise and physical activity, knowing, it's been a year now since the first COVID cases. So hopefully folks have been finding ways to still stay physically active in some ways, even if it's in your own homes. Hopefully also with vaccinations now and the nice spring weather coming, or at least seeming like it's coming, not to jinx us. But that hopefully there's going to be more opportunities soon to get out and exercise. So we are fortunate to have Dr. Moyer with us today, who's going to lead us through that discussion. Before we get to that, just to cover a couple of housekeeping things. I will make sure that this is enabled, but you should be able to ask questions through the chat feature. There is also a Q&A, which shows up in the bottom of your Zoom panels. The Q&A does have an option where you can ask questions anonymously. So if you have something more personal that you're sharing and you don't want your name attached to it, you can ask questions anonymously. Things you put in the chat will be visible to other presenters. Anyone watching us on Facebook, just write your questions as a comment and I will relay those during the presentation. Before we get into today's talk, I want to just quickly turn it over to Dr. Liz Spina, who you may recognize from past Doctors In programs, who wants to make a quick announcement about a project that they are doing over at Jefferson. So take it away, Liz.
Thanks again, David. So thank you guys for your time. I just wanted to make a quick announcement about a project that we've started at the Thomas Jefferson Center for Healthy Aging, which is our family medicine practice for older adults. And we noticed that we would like to improve the care that we deliver to older adults that identify as LGBT. And a lot of the initiatives that have been in place at other times have been really focused on younger LGBT identifying individuals. And I think it's time that we focus on older adults too. And so the survey that we've put out really goes through some values and some key points in medicine that are important. And we'd like to have your feedback and input so that we can improve the care that we deliver. And so it would mean a lot to us if we heard your voices. And David has put the link to the survey in the chat. And I really look forward to hearing from you all. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Liz. And thanks again for taking the time to hear from LGBTQ communities. So I think it's important that folks take the opportunity to share your voices and your perspectives. And again, so the link is in the chat. So to turn it over for today's presentation, I'm happy to welcome back Dr. Jenny Moyer, who did one of these Doctor Is In programs with us in the fall. That was wonderful. And so we're so excited to have you back. So I'm going to turn it over. Oh, the other thing I'll say, feel free to ask your questions at any point. I will keep an eye on the chat and the Q&A and the Facebook page, and I will relay your questions. So feel free to ask those at any point. And please welcome Dr. Jenny Moyer.
All right, thanks everyone for coming today to this virtual format. Maybe someday we'll come back to being together in person, which would be nice. So I did give one of these talks in the fall on cancer screenings. And so this is a little bit of a different topic, but still largely about preventative medicine and ways that we can overall be healthy. And so we'll be talking about exercise and physical activity today. So we're going to be talking about what the benefits of exercise are, different types of exercises, modifications to typical exercises, and then setting a plan to move. And we won't really be talking too much about nutrition, though I certainly recognize that that's an important part of this as well, but we're going to be talking more about ways to physically move today. So why move? I know that I'm sure many of people have been thinking about this, especially during the pandemic, and trying to think about how to be safe both in your home and outside of your home, who you are interacting with. And if we try to think about the pre-pandemic times and the ways that we were moving and interacting with each other, really there's so many benefits that we can think of in terms of just movement overall. Some of the things that we think about are probably things that most of us could name off the top of our head. So things like it can be fun to move, it feels good to move, group activities, increased time for socialization, and really any movement is what we're talking about, whether it's gardening, being in a pool with your family and friends, doing some exercises. Most people will say that moving feels good overall, and recognize that it does have some importance to their life, even if it's not in the structured way that we think about exercise. But in addition to these general benefits that we can think of, there are some specific medical associations that we have proven through some of the research that many people have done over the years. So we know that it can potentially lower the risk of dementia. We know that it can help to reduce anxiety and depression, and really actually is an important part of the treatment of anxiety and depression, just as we think of medications. It can really help with the quality of sleep. And I'll say that sleep is also something that we could probably do a whole lecture on, but we know that improving the quality of sleep and sleep in general both have a lot to do with how people feel overall. We know also that it can reduce the risk of injury from falls and may also reduce the risk of falls in overall, and then it can improve bone strength as well. So I think these are some of the more specific medical associations that we have with movement and with exercise. And we'll be talking a little bit about what we mean, the medical community means when we say exercise. But just keeping these in mind, that in addition to kind of the general benefits that we think of overall, that there are some things that we are specifically trying to prevent down the line when we try to get people to exercise. In this slide, I think I'd really just wanted to show, to point out the relationship between our behaviors of sitting and moving. And I certainly know that I've done a lot of sitting over the last year, and probably most of us are sitting right now at our computer screens. And so this diagram is really to show that even for people that spend a lot of time sitting, so even if we think about older adults who may be spending more time in bed or in wheelchairs, any sort of moderate or to vigorous physical activity can really improve the mortality. So it's not just that if you're sitting, you're sort of destined to have a higher risk of mortality. If we can get any sort of movement, we know we can kind of shift your overall risk and improve your health in general, even if you do spend a lot of time sitting. And there is certainly a relationship between the amount of time sitting and this vigorous physical activity. So ideally, we could get everyone, can you guys see my cursor? I don't actually know. Yes, okay. So if we could get everyone into this green area, that would be great. Everyone walking, standing, moving all the time. But we know that that's probably not going to happen, even with just people working. I mean, I spend a lot of time at my computer during the day, but even if I'm sitting half of the time, if I can include some physical activity throughout my day, then I can really increase my health overall. And then how much time, or what do we think of in terms of time? So generally, research shows that the more time we spend moving, the better it is. And the overall trends, and this data is from the CDCs. So the overall trend is that if we try to think about what's kind of the sweet spot in terms of getting the most benefit that we can from exercise, it's probably somewhere, oops, I don't know what happened to my cursor. somewhere around this 150 to 300 minutes of moderate physical activity. So that's when we see kind of the curve start to plateau. And then from there, that you do still get improved outcomes, but it's not as sharp as right around that 150 minutes of moderate physical activity. And that's where a lot of the data will show, is about that 150 minutes. So if you're listening to the news, reading newspaper articles, most people will say this 150 minutes is kind of what people will quote. But just to
clarify.
Yep.
Per week. Mm-hmm.
Per week, yes. Yep. Mm-hmm. And this is really just to show that it's okay to do more. And there's certainly no like hard stopping point, and that there is not necessarily any increased risk by doing more exercise. And then just another thing, I wanted to talk about the sedentary behavior, which includes the time that we spend sitting, but we know that activities done while sitting, reclining, lying down can over time increase the risk of all-cause mortality, like I talked about, increase the risk of heart disease, increase the risk of type 2 diabetes. And so I thought this was kind of a nice trajectory of where we are in time. A lot of us are probably around here, and we want to try to get at least some time in this standing, walking mode. And so trying to think about ways that we can include that into our regular daily life. And then I think that if I were in the room with you all, and I would ask you all what makes it hard to move, and I was just thinking for myself, these are certainly some things that I know people, my patients, and then I think about time. It's really can feel overwhelming to find the time to dedicate to moving or to exercise. It's hard to get motivated. Some people don't know how, or really don't know where to start. Those of you who have some medical conditions may be thinking, I'm not sure what I can do with these medical conditions that I have. And there are people who don't have access to resources that we need to exercise, or that we think we might need to exercise, or that there isn't really a safe space to move. And so certainly trying to think of some of these barriers that we have and how we can try to minimize them to get any sort of movement into your regular life. We'll be talking about that as well. All right, so this is kind of the bulk of the presentation, the types of movement. So when we think about activity, people or movement overall, we'll think about different types of movement. So I divided it into two different things: physical activity and then exercise. And these two are, while they both are types of movement, they're a little bit different. So physical activity, that's activities that generally get your body moving. These are activities that we probably don't necessarily think about as an activity, but that we might just include in our regular daily life. Gardening, walking the dog, raking leaves, taking the stairs, housekeeping, those sorts of things are physical activity. Things that you don't necessarily think, okay, now I'm going to exercise and you go take the stairs or rake the leaves, but that are ways that we are moving our bodies in a regular manner. And then on the flip side of that, we have exercise, which is really structured, specifically planned activity that's repetitive. And I think that that's really the key word, is this sort of repetitive movement that we're doing over a period of time. And that's a specifically planned activity. So the goal of this activity is to exercise and to move your muscles in this repetitive manner, ultimately getting your heart rate up a little bit, breathing a little bit faster. And that's when we really start to see some of the benefits to things like the mortality that we're thinking about. And those are the traditional things that people may think of as exercise: weight training, biking, running, tai chi, aerobics classes, walking, which is a common one that we'll think of. And just to keep in mind that while both of these are different, they both are types of movement, and really any movement that you can get is going to help overall. So this is really, I think, the key takeaway of the presentation here is that, and this is the recommendation from the CDC, is that adults need different types of activity. And they divide it into two different categories. One is this moderate intensity aerobic activity, and that's the exercise that I described earlier, this repetitive movement that gets your heart beating faster. And the recommendation is at least 150 minutes a week. And I think that it's really important, like Dr. Salzman said, that we think about it as a week. And so whether you think about it as 3 days of 50 minutes or 5 days of 30 minutes or 10 minutes multiple times a day in a row, however you break it down, the research is starting to really show that it's not necessarily the duration of like that specific time that you're exercising. So it's not that 50 minutes is better than 30 minutes. It's really that the goal is to get 150 minutes in a week. So that's 2.5 hours or so. And then the muscle strengthening activity twice a week. So that's activities that make your muscles work harder than usual. And again, these are activities that you generally may do a little bit of, but the goal is to be repetitive and to have this structured time where you're focusing on this activity, and the goal is to do this weight or muscle strengthening activity. So just to break it down a little bit more, aerobic activity, you may see it referred to as cardio. People will talk about it as endurance building or endurance training work. So this is moving large muscles in a rhythmic manner for sustained periods of time. Like I said, this can really include a variety of different activities: brisk walking, jogging, biking, swimming, and aiming for 150 minutes of this kind of activity a week. How do we, when I say like moderate activity or moderate exercise, what does that actually mean? So it's sort of it's a relative term. It's based on how fast your heart rate and breathing is when you're doing this activity. But I think a key thing to think about is that when you're doing moderate activity, generally you can talk, but if you were to try to sing, you would find that you have a hard time doing that because you need to take a breath and it's hard to really extend your voice for periods of time. If you're walking, which I think is probably a common activity that most of us are trying to do now, and is a common activity that older adults will try to do to get exercise, it's about walking about 2.5 to 4 miles per hour, or about 15 to 24 minutes per mile when you're walking. So that's just to kind of keep in mind if you're walking and you thinking about how many miles an hour you're walking, if you can try to get to that, even that 2.5 miles an hour, that would really help to bring you into the moderate intensity activity. And then for those of you who are doing a little bit more than walking, usually we say that high intensity exercise is exercise that you can do and you can only say a few words without taking a breath. So those tend to be things like running, like playing soccer, different sorts of activities where you feel your heart rate is a little bit faster and you're breathing, you need to take more breaths to try to help maintain your oxygenation. And so it's hard to speak a full sentence without taking a breath. If you do high intensity exercise, instead of that 150 minutes, it's 75 minutes a week is the recommended at minimum for adults overall. The other term I wanted to point out is that you may see or hear about what we call MET, or metabolic equivalent of task. And that's just another relative way of sort of categorizing exercise. And sometimes we think about it in terms of how fit people are. But if one MET would be the amount of energy you're spending by sitting at rest, and 10 is sort of the opposite end of the spectrum, at really the highest level of energy expenditure. Jogging, running, is probably somewhere between 4 to 6, depending on how fast you're walking, and or how fast you're running. Running is probably, or walking, sorry, is probably closer to around 3 or so. We don't really think about these terms as like, I certainly don't think about them when I'm walking or exercising myself, but you may read articles that say like you should be generating 4 METs or so, and just to kind of keep in mind that it's really all relative. And if you keep in mind that when you're doing moderate activity, you should not be able to sing. And then if you're doing high levels of activity, that's when you really have a hard time speaking a full sentence without taking a breath. All right, so we talked about this recommendation here, at least 150 minutes a week, and this is this moderate intensity exercise. Like I said, if you do higher intensity exercise, that number of minutes you need to reach is about 75 minutes. So we can talk a little bit more about muscle strengthening activity. So muscle strengthening exercises are exercises that include muscles of the legs, hips, chest, back, abdomen, shoulders, arms, really any muscle that you can think of to move. And the key is to do these activities more than you would do them regularly. So it's not just kind of carrying your groceries in or lifting your laundry basket around the house just one time, but really thinking about doing these repetitive motions over and over to try to strengthen your muscles. That generally people think about as lifting weights is probably the most common thing that comes to mind when you're thinking about muscle strengthening exercises. More commonly, people are starting to use resistance bands, which are really just kind of like large rubber bands that provide some tension when you're doing exercises. Calisthenics or Pilates, people will think about as muscle strengthening exercises too. And this is really when we're thinking about weightlifting, you're trying to do a certain number of repetitions of each exercise, a couple sets at a time. And the goal is really not necessarily like you're feeling that your heart is beating faster or that it's harder to breathe, which would be more of the cardio or the endurance training activity. But this should feel different in terms of when you're doing these activities. You should feel different. The things that will feel different is that specific muscle that you're trying to strengthen may feel more sore, and you're not necessarily feeling, like I said, that heartbeat rise as much, or you're not feeling so short of breath. This is just a table from the CDC of other activities. So other ways to include muscle strengthening activities, for example, digging, lifting, carrying as part of gardening. So if you are lifting soil and you're walking back and forth with that could be considered muscle strengthening activities. Other aerobic activities, if you are doing more yard work, like pushing a lawnmower, playing sports, which we haven't really thought about in a long time, but those are certainly aerobic activities that can help in terms of thinking about ways to increase your movement. I did want to point out, though the CDC really talks about those 2 different recommendations, there are some other exercises that you may think of. One of them is balance training exercise. And I think we think about this, especially in older adults, when we think about adults who may have had falls or are nervous about falling or who have some challenges with their gait. The idea of balance training exercises is to really try to improve your body's ability to resist these falls. Some of these exercises can be pretty simple, exercises like walking heel to toe, practicing sitting from standing, core muscle strengthening exercises. We'll think about these as balance exercises. And then for our older adults, we also think about flexibility. And that's another kind of activity that involves stretching. And the goal of flexibility is really to extend or preserve the range of motion around a joint. And we know that this can help with improving posture, energy levels. It can help with some arthritis. And overall, with flexibility, with improved flexibility and balance, our goal is that hopefully your risk of falling or a risk of a serious injury from falling would be decreased. All right, so how do we actually get this activity into your schedule? The most studied regimen is probably at least 3 days a week. We think that at least 3 days a week is associated with a reduction in risk of injury and can prevent excessive fatigue. So it's not like you're trying to do 150 minutes all at once. But like I said, really anything that you can think of, if you go to work every day and you think, okay, well, I spend 10 minutes in a brisk walk in the morning, I'm going to do 10 minutes at lunch and then 10 minutes after work. That's 30 minutes in the day, and that can count towards that 150 minutes. It doesn't need to be prolonged periods of time. And I think that that's a nice way to think about trying to include this aerobic activity into your schedule. If you're new to exercise, the general recommendations are really to start low and go slow. I think that that's something that probably we think about for everything in our older adults when we take care of them as physicians. And starting low, going slow, really paying attention to what your body is telling you and kind of easing into whatever activity you're going to be doing. I'll point out here that people will ask also about, like, is it important to warm up? Do we need to have some cool down period? If you're really trying to get a chunk of time of exercising, we'll kind of think about this warm up and cool down as kind of this bell-shaped curve where you're trying to warm up, which is starting slow and getting your heart rate up a little bit and incrementally. People will do this in different ways. If you're jogging, for example, you may start out a little bit slower for 5 or so minutes and then kind of get to the pace where you want to go. If you're doing some exercise in your home, it may be just kind of doing a couple minutes of swinging your arms, really just in a circle and getting your blood flowing if you're going to be doing arm exercises. Cooling down, the idea is that will prevent muscle cramps, dizziness while your heart rate's starting to slow down. And this is also a time when we can think about incorporating things like stretching to help relax and lengthen your muscles. All right. So I definitely wanted to, that's kind of exercise overall, but I wanted to talk about exercising with some chronic conditions or with specific conditions that might apply to some older adults. So I think this is one that will come up a lot, moving with arthritis. And I think a lot of patients will say, I can't really move because I have arthritis, or I move too much and that's why I have my arthritis. And just wanted to point out that we think that generally moving will not necessarily, you will not make arthritis worse by exercising. We know that aerobic and muscle strengthening exercises can help to maintain mobility and that it can improve the quality of life and sometimes help to make the pain better as well. Some sort of things that we'll think about are like water exercises can be an exciting thing to try if you're having a lot of pain with arthritis, because when you're in the water, you don't perceive the weight of your whole body. And so that may be a little bit more gentle on your joints. But I think for those of you with arthritis, if you feel like you have a hard time thinking about what would be safe to do, a safe bet is always to start by asking your doctor if you can get some physical therapy. I think we really everyone would benefit from a physical therapist in some way, and they would really help to tailor some exercises to your condition specifically and to start slow. And so the benefit of the physical therapy is that you may go to a certain location and they will help you. They'll kind of examine you and figure out what sort of exercises will work best. Physical therapy works best when you take those exercises home with you and you continue to do them at home, because exercise is one of those things that once you stop, you kind of start to lose that benefit overall. So really, it's important to start it and try to find ways to maintain it. So people will say, oh, I did my physical therapy years ago. I went for 6 weeks for my knees. and then I came home and then I didn't do them as much and now my knees hurt again. And it's kind of to say that we have to find ways where we can try to maintain some of those exercises, and important to have that conversation with a physical therapist if that's where you're going. Other things, I think, moving with diabetes, I know a lot of older adults and certainly a lot of my patients do have diabetes. Overall, we know that it can help to reduce the risk of heart disease. It can help to improve your body weight. It can help to decrease blood pressure and help to lower blood sugar as well. This is something that I think probably a lot of our diabetic patients do think about, is proper footwear. The idea of proper footwear is really to try to prevent the risk of blisters, calluses, or other injuries to your feet. This is really important for anyone who's doing any type of exercise, just making sure that you're wearing good shoes when you're going to be doing these exercises, but certainly for patients with diabetes who may have some of that neuropathy or some loss of sensation on their feet, we want to really make sure that we are not injuring your foot when you're doing something. So whether it's that you have diabetic shoes or you see a podiatrist, just to make sure you're wearing the right shoes. Generally, the right shoes will have some more arch support. They will have maybe a little bit of a harder sole as well. And certainly, like, not wearing open-toed shoes if you're going to be trying to do exercises is important. And then I will say, if you are starting an exercise regimen, and especially if you're on medications that can decrease your blood sugar, like insulin, just to kind of keep track of your blood sugars, and you may not need as much if you really are starting to incorporate exercises into your regular routine. And so start talking to your doctor about some of these changes that you're noticing if you are starting to exercise. And then moving with physical limitations. So a lot of the exercises that are out there, or the ads that you see for gyms, you'll see people that are really young and fit, and certainly may not be people that you identify with. And we have to think about how can we modify the typical exercises that we think of to your physical limitations. And just to know that there are a lot of resources out there. So for some specific conditions, like for people with Parkinson's, we know that it can improve physical function, balance, and muscle strength. If you've had a history of stroke, or if you have, for example, weakness on one side or the other, exercise can improve function and walking and endurance speed. And then if you are in a wheelchair for a lot of your day, it can help overall with improving your wheelchair skills, muscle strength, certainly the upper extremity function, which is really important to those who are in a wheelchair. And I'll show some sort of resources for moving with physical limitations as well. And then when to talk to your doctor. So if you haven't really been exercising and feel like after listening to this that it's time to get started, certainly feel free to talk to your doctor if you aren't sure if you should be doing a certain activity. If you're recovering from an illness or an injury, for example, if you recently had a fall and you hurt something, or you've recently been hospitalized, even if it's unrelated, for example, if you had troubles breathing, or even if you're recovering from something like COVID, just to think about talking to your doctor about what sort of activities you could be starting with. And then if at any point you are having intense pain, any significant chest pain, or trouble breathing with the activity, certainly things to keep track of, and really paying attention to your body when you're doing these exercises, and starting low and going slow, and talking to your doctor when you have questions. There are actually, I know at Jefferson, the sports medicine department has actually started doing what they call exercise consultations. So for people who are new to exercise and have specific concerns, that you can see the sports medicine doctors and they can kind of help you come up with an exercise regimen that would be appropriate to you. So there are resources out there in terms of talking to people about what would be best to tailor for your specific needs. All right, so how do I get started from here? ways to get moving. I tried to find some resources, both virtually and in the area for all of you. The Silver Sneakers program is something that a lot of my patients will ask me about. This is available at no cost for adults 65 and plus through specific Medicare plans. And I can send this presentation out as well so that you guys can have the links to these things. But you can go onto the website and look at specific health plans to see if your health plan makes you eligible for Silver Sneakers. There's certainly a lot of free exercise apps and websites out there. Some of the most popular ones for I took this from a survey on AARP. So Map My Fitness, which is an Under Armour app, you can actually download the app onto your phone, but you can also just log into the website and sort of track different exercises. The Silver Sneakers Go app or website also has some great resources. And then Runkeeper, if you're a jogger, is another one. You can certainly think about a gym membership. I think that may be something that many of us have sort of paused or put on hold during this time. And I think just to keep in mind, as people are starting to get vaccinated and things are opening up, that there are places that are trying to do this safely. And certainly when you're comfortable, if you feel safe to go back to a gym, that they are great places for people to get some of this activity in. And then getting involved in hobbies at home. And so if you have a hobby that's a little bit more sedentary right now, trying to think about another one that you can try to start that might include a little bit more physical movement. So specific programs near us, this is a screenshot from Silver Sneakers, and they sort of partner with different gyms or different organizations in the area. And I tried to base it sort of on where the William Way Center is. So most of these are in Center City, but the South Philadelphia Older Adult Center is a location that did have a lot of resources. It's a little bit hard for me to tell exactly what resources they have right now during COVID, but certainly keep in mind that that's a location that would have some resources for adults, certainly as things start to open up a little bit more.
If I could just add into that, Jenny,
Yeah.
I know a lot of senior centers in more normal times do have fitness centers, with varying types of equipment. So if you do, again, under more normal times, if you are a member of a senior center or go to senior centers, they also have a lot of classes. What I wanted to mention is I know a lot of places also are trying to do virtual remote exercise classes.
Yeah.
I follow a lot of just on Facebook, through my work, know a lot of the senior centers. And so I get a lot of like pop-ups sometimes of, this exercise class is starting live. So if you are a part of a senior center, I would just recommend checking in with them of what are they doing virtually, even if they're not open yet. So there might be some ways to engage in some exercise classes, which again, I think can sometimes add to the having the structure, knowing the specific time, can have some of the aspects of socialization. So I just wanted to throw that in too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's actually pretty amazing how most of these places have started to have virtual activities. Even I was looking at the YMCA, so there are many locations in the Philadelphia area. It is $44 a month per membership for adults greater than 65, though a lot of insurance plans do partner with YMCA. So certainly you may have a benefit that decreases your monthly rate. But the membership, for example, at the Christian Street YMCA, the gym is open, and they're sort of limiting the number of people that are physically present there. But they also actually, if you go onto their website, have a lot of pre-recorded classes, and then they also have the option for live classes that you can get through your membership. And so I think the benefit of some of these is that if you previously were not able to join these classes because of time or whatever, the commute, or it was hard to get to a certain location, it's great. I think one of the positives about or at least I think something that will continue after this pandemic sort of hopefully resolves, is that a lot of these online resources will continue to be available for people, so that if you have a trouble getting outside of your house, if you have access to the internet, that you should be able to continue to have some of these resources. And then I think probably a lot of us have fitness trackers now. There's many different kinds out there: Fitbit, Apple Watch, they're like Garmin ones, a lot of different types of fitness trackers. I think the research is sort of trying to catch up to all the different types of fitness trackers that are out there. But it seems as though that generally the thing that they help with the most is they can help with motivation for exercising. You can set your Fitbit or your Apple Watch to remind you to move. If you can set like every hour to remind you to stand up for a little bit of time. So those things might be helpful. And they do actually help in terms of getting probably the number of steps in per day. So that's probably something that's really common. People will generally set it to a certain number of steps a day. And by having a fitness tracker, most studies show that you may actually improve on the number of steps that you take. We don't know yet whether or not this is really associated with improvements in heart health or weight loss, but I think certainly no harm in keeping track or trying to use something like that to motivate you to get moving. And so that's something that I know people are starting to use and to wear more commonly. And then what about COVID and exercise, and what do we know overall from that? What are some takeaways? So there are a lot of programs that existed in place pre-COVID that now have really started to tailor some of their regimens for sort of this COVID era where most people are trying to minimize the interactions that they have to have with others. So this is a Walk with Ease is a program from the Osteoarthritis Action Alliance that actually was started as a research study. And the idea was to try to create a self-directed plan, so something that you can do on your own without having to do or attend a group class. And it's a walking program. If you go onto this website and you register, then you can get this book for free. Otherwise, you can buy it on Amazon for $8. But it really starts pretty slowly and then tries to increase the amount of activity you're doing over time, and kind of has, it's almost like a journal where you keep track of how you're doing, if certain things hurt or not, to try to keep track and help you overall in terms of increasing your movement in a sustainable way. This is specifically things that you can do around the home. The Walk with Ease program came up with this list of things to do around the home during COVID. So pace around your home while talking on the phone, see how far you can walk in 10 minutes, how many laps can you do around your living room. You can march in place while holding onto a chair or railing. If you have stairs in your home, you can think about going up and down the stairs. All of these things are great things to do. Just to keep in mind that if you're going to be exercising in your home, to make sure you're minimizing the clutter. If you have sort of rugs that may be in there, if you have any cords, if you have clothes on the floor, boxes, to try to clear out the space so we're trying to minimize the risk of falling when you're at home. I went on this, really was just looking for any resources in Philadelphia, and actually the Philadelphia Parks and Rec website has a YouTube program that you can subscribe to, and they record different activities that you can do in your home, which is actually pretty incredible. So some of these things, for example, hockey stick handling and drills we may not be doing at home, but intro to gymnastics or an interactive dance lesson, yoga breaks, you can subscribe to this. And I think I actually found this from the Philadelphia, the Corporation for the Aging, the PCA Center has this sort of as something that you can do on their website. And then I found this, I guess it's kind of like a mini conference or a virtual fitness training program for the National Center on Healthy Physical Activity and Disability. And this is, they have a lot of different activities, and a lot of them are sort of more exercises that you can do if you have specific physical limitations that you can register for. It's free if you're interested in learning about some of these exercises. And then I think Silver Sneakers is a big one. So not only do they have partnerships with different centers in Philadelphia, but they actually have a pretty robust online presence. And so you can download the app, and their live classes that you can stream from your computer and then keep track of on your app. There are many different things out there, and I guess at some point it's a matter of how do you pick what to do. AARP has a lot of different web sort of links as well, so many different resources, and resources that are tailored to older adults as well. I think, let me just see. So I'll show you this website after. I think I just wanted to say the overall takeaway from this presentation is that the more you move, the better it is, really, in any way that you can think of. If it's simple as I'm going to put my water glass across the room, so every time I'm thirsty, I'm going to go across the room to go get my water glass, which will include probably sitting up to standing, taking some steps and coming back and sitting down. The idea is that we would like everyone to get 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise a week, muscle strengthening exercises that include major muscle groups twice a week. And then talking to a healthcare provider if you have some questions about what you can or cannot do. I think if there was something that we could do as healthcare providers, I think if we could prescribe exercise as a pill, and if we could tell someone we know it can reduce the risk of falls, it can help your mood, it can help with your balance, it can help potentially reduce your risk of dementia, and there's this one pill you can take, I think a lot of people would take it, and that pill for us may be exercise. And so how do we really get our patients and everyone motivated to do this? It's a hard question. And I think a lot of us, I certainly struggle with it myself, even knowing all of these benefits. So I think everyone is at their own place and really figuring out where to start for you and what makes the most sense for you. And in that vein, so this Move Your Way activity planner I thought was pretty cool, and just something I wanted to show you all. So, and I'll send you all the link for this. So on this right-hand side, they have the general recommendations. So 150 minutes of aerobic activity and then 2 days of muscle strengthening activity. So you can sort of click aerobic, and I think I selected things that you could do on your own earlier, so you can kind of tailor the activities. And they have all these different activities that you could potentially do. So for example, if I say, okay, I think I probably will be able to do some brisk walking, and you click on brisk walking, and I'm going to make my goal of 20 minutes. Let's say I walk to and from work, and that's brisk. So I'm going to do it 5 days a week. I'm going to add it to my plan, and it'll kind of count and keep track of the minutes up here for you. And then maybe on the weekend, I'm probably going to go hiking. And so that I'll do 30 minutes. And then we'll do some household chores. And that might take me about 20 minutes or so. So now I've gotten to my goal of 150 minutes. And then you can go back up to the top and click muscle strengthening activity. And I may do some, let's see, Pilates. I'm going to try to do it twice. So I'm going to add this to my plan, and then we can review your plan. And I thought this was cool. It allows you to print this tracker, which kind of has the activities that you were hoping to do, and then this weekly calendar, so that you can print this out, put it in your house so you have a tracker for yourself. You can do this with a family member, or they can help you print it out for you and just kind of help to motivate you and keep track of it in terms of the amount of activity that we are trying to get everyone to do. So there's a lot of different resources out there like this. This is just one of them. And I'm sure many of you have tried different things. If you have any suggestions for other people listening to this presentation, or if Dr. Salzman, you have any other things that you've seen people enjoy doing, or any suggestions that you give your patients. that's kind of what I have for you all.
I think that's a great point, Jenny, and I would definitely invite people, if they're comfortable doing so, in the chat. If you do have websites that you use, YouTube channels that you use, where you found exercise videos that you like, or good exercise trackers like the one Jenny was just sharing, definitely feel free to share those in the chat, because other people might benefit from those. It's a lot out there, like Jenny was saying. Sometimes it's not knowing where to start, because there are a lot of good resources that hopefully, yes, even after COVID, hopefully a lot of this does stay online, because it does make it, assuming you have the internet access, it does make these things very accessible, especially with all the different classes that are out there, the guided videos, all of that. Also would invite folks to get any questions in, either through the chat or the Q&A. One of the things, Jenny, we were sort of joking at the beginning as folks were joining about, demonstrating things with soup cans, just if that's what you have around the house. But any other sort of tips and tricks for, things that people might just have in their homes, in their apartments, that can be turned into exercise equipment?
Yeah, so soup cans actually probably are equivalent to about a 2-pound weight. So if you're thinking of like, should you be buying weights? If you have soup cans and you try lifting them, probably not the 28-ounce ones, but just like the smaller, regular 15, I think they're 15-ounce cans. They're about 2 pounds. So if you have those in your home, and even if it's just doing some exercises with that, or people, if you don't have soup cans, if you have just even like a regular, maybe not Coke, I should probably be showing that I'm drinking water, but if you have something like a water bottle, you have 2 of them, that you can use those as sort of small weights in your home. So there are certainly things that you can be using in your home if you have resistance bands, which are things that you can buy online as well. And a lot of physical therapists will use, that are really like big rubber bands. And even if you hold them and kind of stretch them out, and they provide some resistance, so you can do a lot of exercises, particularly seated with that can be really helpful. If we were in person, maybe we would have done some exercises together.
Well, we'll do one of these in the future again, and get everyone up and moving. And I think also, you mentioned, dance. You mentioned, I think, Tai Chi, Pilates. That a lot of these can be very social things, which you mentioned as another one of the benefits.
Yeah, I think, in regular times, and probably even as the weather gets nicer, I think even over the summer, there were a lot of like gyms that were doing outdoor exercise classes, and I would see them in different parks, especially like Tai Chi. A lot of communities will do outside in the morning. I'll see people doing that, yoga classes outside. And that can be a potentially safe way for us to get together as the weather changes and things get warmer.
And I know one of the things that's come up in some other health program that we've done is sometimes just having like an exercise buddy. So either someone who, again, once it is safe to do so, either someone who you're going to a gym with, or even just someone who you walk with. It's going to come with that social benefit. It's some of that accountability to have a set time where you're going to do this and focus on it. So I think that's also just another consideration for folks, is sort of who might be someone in your life who you could exercise with from time to time.
Right, and I think overall, certainly if you're wearing your mask and you're outside, the risks of COVID are probably much less than certainly being inside. And so if sitting outside is too cold or uncomfortable, moving can help keep you warm. So even in the winter, I found myself doing a lot more walks outside, even though it's a little bit cold, just so that I can interact with others in a safe way. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. I think, certainly my takeaway from this was that the 150 minutes of exercise, this moderate intensity exercise, and that really it's not a matter of, it's not like you have to do 30 minutes at a time to consider it exercise, that you can really break it down into small amounts throughout the day, and that whatever seems manageable for you to do is what we want you to do. Anything is certainly better than nothing, and any movement that we can think of getting is great.
Anyone else have any questions or comments that you'd like to get in before we break for the day? I love that that health tracker. The
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I
might
thought
start
it's pretty easy
try that.
to use. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, to have a way to sort of
Mm-hmm.
to help you schedule things and to really track
Right.
your progress.
Right.
I think.
Yeah.
I think that's a barrier for a lot of folks, is maybe you say, oh, here are all these exercises I'm going to do, but then it sort of slips away, or you know, other things come up, or you just can't get motivated to work it into your routine. So I will leave it there. Oh, so the one thing I did want to say, so Jenny, if you are able to share your slides.
Yep, I'll send them to you.
As long as, so for folks who registered, so basically if you got an email from me yesterday reminding you about today's program, that I have your email, and I will send these slides out to you with some of these links, hopefully later today. If not, then tomorrow. If anyone is joining who didn't register, maybe you just got the link directly from our site or from someone else, just shoot me an email. I'm going to put my email in the chat. And that way I can make sure to get the slides out to you and the links as well. Same with anyone on Facebook, just to contact me. Thank you all very much for joining us. Thank you so much to Dr. Moyer. We really appreciate the presentation, and hopefully, you know, this gives folks some tips to stay active in your own homes, in your apartments, and hopefully soon, again, with the weather getting nicer, and once we get through these vaccinations and things start opening back up, hopefully many more opportunities to stay active and get those 150 minutes a week. So I think we can leave it there. Thank you all so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
All right.